This next section will talk about different options for clinical supervision or case review. First, it's important to be clear about what the roles and responsibilities are of the clinical supervisor to know what options are available. Their main role is to meet with Pearls coaches or counselors regularly to provide consultation and supervision. This consultation and supervision is typically around addressing co-occurring medical concerns for Pearls participants, any complex psychiatric issues that may emerge, and any interactions with medications, whether antidepressants or medications they're taking for chronic conditions such as diabetes or hypertension. Clinical supervisors can also help provide an additional perspective for more complex participants. For example, participants who may be managing multiple chronic conditions that lead to fatigue and challenges in mobility and function, or with challenging home situations with family members that they live with. The clinical supervisor also really helps address concerns around liability or any emergencies from doing a depression intervention. For example, they help an organization establish a suicide and self-harm protocol and support the coaches in carrying that out when somebody expresses thoughts about suicide. Lastly, the clinical supervisor really provides ongoing training, skill building, and support for your Pearls coaches. So who can serve as a clinical supervisor? It's important that the person have clinical experience working with older adults and with the medications that they take for both their depression and physical chronic conditions. In the original research, this person was a psychiatrist, and in practice, we've seen clinical supervisors also be licensed clinical social workers, psychiatric nurse practitioners, or geriatricians. It's okay if your organization has one person who supervises and manages the medication piece, so someone with medical training, and one who manages the problem solving and the behavioral activation piece, such as someone with training in counseling or social work. And often that person is actually external to the organization. So you can work with an academic medical center, a community mental health center, or a private practitioner who's offering the services for reduced or low cost. These are some of the common questions we get about how clinical supervision is done. And we've partnered with organizations like yours to try and make clinical supervision more accessible so that more frontline providers who reach underserved older adults can adopt Pearls. So here's what we've learned and things to consider when you're planning supervision. First, think about how often you'll hold supervision and for how long it'll last. This really will depend on how many coaches you have and how many clients they're seeing. So for example, you may only meet once a month if you only have one coach who's seeing one or two clients at a time. Whereas if you have a team of several coaches who are seeing multiple clients over time, you may want to meet once a week or once every other week. We encourage you to schedule the meetings regularly, though, so those supports are always there for your Pearls team, particularly early on as they're learning the skills and supporting each other. You can always have a shorter session if there's not a lot of cases to review. You'll next want to think about whether you're going to do supervision in person or by the telephone, such as a regular phone conference line or through a video conferencing platform like Zoom. Both of these options work well for doing supervision, as you can do all of it remotely and share any documentation as needed remotely as well. Next, you'll want to think about whether you do supervision as a group or one-on-one. In practice, we found that many organizations benefit from doing group supervision, as it's not only a way to more efficiently provide and receive supervision, but it's also an opportunity for coaches to learn from other peers on how they're applying the Pearls skills, what common challenges might emerge in applying the skills, and to really learn from and support each other. This group supervision doesn't have to just be within your organization. We can also help connect you to other organizations in your area that are doing Pearls. And this can be also a way that you share a clinical supervisor and share the cost across organizations. In terms of where to access a clinical supervisor, as most of the time they will be external to your organization. We've heard organizations have success in reaching out to local or academic medical centers or universities or colleges in their state where there may be clinicians who are providing training as part of their residency or other school. This can also be a place you may access retired or semi-retired clinicians who really may be wanting to provide the service for free or for a low cost to the communities to support community-based depression care. It's important that the supervisor be in state often for liability and other insurance purposes, but they don't have to be local, given that, as we talked about earlier, you can do supervision remotely. Next, you'll want to think about what documentation is needed for your clinical supervisor. Often, the tools that are in the toolkit are all that's needed, such as the tracking chart and sharing information from the PHQ-9 or the worksheet, but you'll have to work with your clinical supervisor to see what documentation they need. Lastly, you'll need to figure out what payment model is going to work best. Often, organizations set up a simple contract with the clinical supervisor and set up a regular payment schedule, such as monthly or quarterly invoicing.